Hey folks, I don't know if you're headed towards the end of your mortgage right now. Maybe it's sort of within an arm's reach. That's the time to start thinking about your next mortgage. Even if you may pay a small penalty, you'll more than recoup it if you get under the right rate over the next 3 to 5 years. Talk to Jason Hominick at jason.mortgage. You can give him a call there, and he'll be the one that picks up the phone and answers, dealing with you one-on-one, getting to know you, getting to know what the next 3 to 5 years of your life looks like, and making sure that you get a mortgage that matches up to you. Hey, the rate is really important, but these days too, getting increased equity with your home, that's a tactical play as well. Maybe you need a little reno. Maybe there's other big expenses in your life. You can extract that equity right now with the value of your home. Talk to Jason Hominick at jason.mortgage.
Joining us now, our Wednesday Insider from the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast, yes, and Hockey Insider as well, Mr. Darren Dreger, here on Sekeres and Price. How you doing?
I'm doing well, guys. Thank you.
Less than a month, Darren, before trade deadline now. And, well, JT Miller to Toronto seems to be flavor of the day. What do you know?
Well, look, from Toronto's perspective, I can understand. JT Miller would be a real nice add for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They've had some problems in their top six, primarily on that second line with Kerfoot and Tavares and Nylander. And I think they like the idea of bumping Kerfoot down to the third line, but then that creates that hole on the second line. So, throw some names out there. JT Miller is one. Travis Konechny from the Philadelphia Flyers, who I don't even believe is on anyone's trade radar. So I don't know why Toronto would be circling around him, but that's the type of player that Toronto is looking at. But the JT Miller rumors aren't going to go away anytime soon. They're just not until the trade deadline passes. I guess the one thing that I'm continually cautioned by, and that's by Jim Rutherford and others around the Vancouver Canucks, is what is the rush with JT Miller? Why do we keep talking about this? And I'm reminded that nobody inside hockey operations in Vancouver is talking about it. They can't stop the speculation, but they've got JT Miller under contract for another year. So there is lots of time. JT Miller is an important piece of the Vancouver Canucks. And again, you always have to, throw the caveat out there that, okay, well, if somebody steps up to the plate and just lobs a significant package your way that stops you in your tracks and you've got to consider it. Of course, you're going to consider it from Vancouver's management standpoint. But, I think to some degree, the Canucks are both amused and annoyed at the endless amount of speculation around JT Miller, to some degree, Connor Garland and Brock Boeser to a level as well.
Well, the JT Miller side, Dregs, is easy to figure out why it keeps annoying them, is that they continue to play 500 hockey right now, and JT Miller continues to get 2 points per game. And so when you're middling and your guy continues to show up in the box score regularly, it just looks like he's ripe for the picking, right?
Yeah, he does. And there's probably a dozen teams, frankly, that would love it if the Vancouver Canucks literally put JT Miller into play. There's nothing wrong with somewhat false advertisement here, right? Like, at least the Canucks and Pat Alvin and Jimmy Rutherford, now they've got the calls that are constantly coming in because of the never-ending speculation. Is it bothersome for JT Miller and for the players who have to deal with it endlessly, day in and day out? Of course it is. But you know what? That's just the world that we now live in the National Hockey League, with the trade deadline now around a month away. They're going to have to deal with it. That's just the way it is. But I think it's a bit annoying from a management perspective as well, because of what you just said, Blake. If he were an expiring contract or even a restricted free agent like Boeser is going to be, okay, well, again, that comes with the territory. But according to the Canucks management, nobody in Vancouver has put that name out there. Yeah, teams called. They're interested in JT Miller, as they should be, because of his level of production. But it's going to take a mammoth offer to, I think, pry JT Miller out before the trade deadline. After that, with the flexibility of the offseason, if management in Vancouver doesn't get what they want to get done between now and March 21st, maybe he becomes more of a commodity at that point from a Canucks perspective, but he's not that today.
As for moving off of JT Miller, we talked last week a little bit about this. Brock Boeser, an RFA with Arbrights on a pretty good ticket, do an even better ticket here. And Dollywall suggested to us Friday, Rick, that he may be the linchpin to all of this, that when they finally get to sitting down with Ben Hankinson, the agent there for Boeser, and getting a sense of how much term and how much money, it might be as easy as, wow, that is so much that we're not going to be able to do that. We're keeping Miller, but we're going to move Boeser on out and get our cap savings that way. How does that strike you? Do you think Boeser in these next couple of months here and whatever the negotiation is with his camp might determine who winds up getting traded?
Well, determine is a strong word. Influence, yes. Yeah, to some degree. And I agree with Rick in that, but you could say that about most teams, right? Especially teams that, are faced with some cap complications. And when you're going into a negotiation with a restricted free agent, you're talking about a prominent player in Brock Boeser for the Vancouver Canucks, so that carries some weight with it as well. And then you've got all of these other areas of need. You want to bring in additional pieces. There are other contracts that you've got to pay attention to, and Boeser needs to be right near the top of the list. So what's that negotiation look like when it hits full steam? And if it doesn't look favorably toward the Vancouver Canucks, then every player has a price and has a cut bait tag. And I honestly don't know where the Vancouver Canucks are at in that sense, where they have Brock Boeser slotted. I know that they, view him as a high character individual, an important piece of the Vancouver Canucks, but that comes at a cost. That comes at a ceiling price. And if the negotiation is beyond that ceiling, well, then I'm on side with Dollywall. I am. Let's see how that negotiation goes. And I think that it's probably one that Patrick Allvin is going to want to have sooner rather than later to just at least get the lay of the land. But that's for the restricted free agents now, guys. And this isn't new. This has happened over the past handful of years. Have more clout and swagger than they've ever had, right? Is because it used to be you're pending unrestricted free agents. Okay, they look at market value, and if they want to leave, they leave. Well, the RFA guys, they've got clout now too. But it does come at a price from a player perspective because therein lies the gamble. If the gap is too significant, whatever that gap is, and there will be a gap between Boeser and what the Canucks want to pay him, well, how bad does Brock Boeser want to extend his time in Vancouver? We're going to find out.
I know last week you told us, look, Rutherford is busy right now getting a very green front office with people in positions they've never held before up to speed and delegating tasks and getting all of that together. At what point would you get worried if there is no sort of negotiation or contact with Ben Hankinson and Boeser's camp? Like, at what point do they really have to get that ball in motion, Dregs?
Well, again, because he's a restricted free agent, the Vancouver Canucks, own the rights of Brock Boeser. So Boeser doesn't have a hammer in this case. It can flip that way. So I would say if you're drifting, you certainly by the end of the season, I think both the player and the team are going to want to know what direction this is going to head. But with no level of certainty. Again, you've got other vehicles that can be employed here, but the team still has the hammer in that they control his rights. And if Brock Boeser doesn't like what the Vancouver Canucks are sending his way at the end of it, and he decides that, okay, well, we're not going to get a deal done. We've gone through all the processes here to try and execute something. I don't have a contract, so I'm not coming back. Well, that gets distasteful, as we've seen historically speaking. I'm not saying it's ever going to get to that point. I just, the way Ben Hankinson does his business, I doubt that it gets to there. But I don't look at March 21st as being necessarily a trigger point from Boeser's perspective or the Canucks. But that can change too, right? Like if all of a sudden, Jimmy Rutherford says to Patrick Allvin, look, my experience tells me that we need to get a real firm answer as to what we're doing here with Boeser moving forward. And if we don't have that answer by March 21st, then all bets are off. Again, without really talking to either side about the specifics of that, it does get complicated in a hurry.
The last couple of weeks, we did the deep dives on the Rangers prospects, and we got to know Braden Schneider and Keandre Miller and Nils Lundqvist as it pertained to any possible trades with the Rangers. With Miller on this Leaf horizon, or at least people connecting the two sides. The name of the hour right now is Timothy Liljegren, whom we talked about at length in his draft year, Matt, if you remember our draft shows, and
Yes.
was he the great find in the mid-teens there for the Leafs, or did he slide down there for a reason? Have the Leafs, I don't know about giving up, because they've seen some development there, but are they willing to cut bait on the prospect, or do they think he might be realized into, he was a top 10 projection early in that draft year?
Well, he's not trending to that, but he is developing, and they like his path of development. The reason that we keep talking nationally about, Toronto looking in the market for, top 3, top 4 for sure defenseman, it's more from because of the lack of experience in Rasmus Sandin and Timothy Liljegren. The names we keep hearing more on trade speculation related to Toronto are around Travis Dermott and Justin Hall. So in Liljegren and or Sandin, and I'm going to put Liljegren below Sandin, I think it would take a real sweet deal for the Toronto Maple Leafs to move one of those two pieces. But I also, when I look at Timothy Liljegren, if a team can pry him away from the Maple Leafs, I think he's going to be good. And by good, I mean capable of top 4. I'm not saying he's a top pairing defenseman, but I'm also not cutting him off at the knees and saying he can't be. I feel like he's getting to a place in his career where change wouldn't also be a bad thing just because of who he's playing behind right now. But is he a deal breaker or a deal maker? I think Toronto, it would have to be a real good improvement for the Maple Leafs to consider that. And the two areas that Toronto is most focused on right now, defense and a top 6 winger. And defense, becomes a bigger issue if Jake Muzzin is out for an extended period of time. He says he's feeling better, but we all saw the incident, in the collision with Wideman against the Montreal Canadiens. That was scary, especially considering he just came off, a month away with dealing with concussion. So if they're able to utilize his cap space, if he's out long-term at $5.625 million, that puts him in a bigger snack bracket. And maybe they get the perfect defenseman, and they do have to throw Liljegren in. Otherwise, I doubt that they move him other than that.
Speaking of trading defenseman, Jim Rutherford has been on record with us and elsewhere saying you might be surprised where I trim salary, and it may not be the forwards, the usual list of characters there. The name Tyler Myers was thrown out there. He's in the middle year right now. Unbelievable, guys. He's past the midway point of this contract at the end of this season, just 2 years left at $6 million per season. And he's been better this year than maybe the first 2 years of the contract. But is that contract tradable, do you think, without having to take on salary? And if you have to take on salary, is it even worth it for Jim Rutherford?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one to move if you're not willing to take on some salary. But what makes it, palatable to a point is that 2 years, it's not a length of time, right? Tyler Myers, because of the fact that he is playing better, and he's a big man, he covers a lot of ice, all of those things. There's reasons to like Tyler Myers. So I think that the interest would be there. I haven't heard that name out there. I haven't, not one time. And I talked to a lot of teams. TSN just posted its most recent trade bait list. We scoured the league. So I think if Myers were to be thrown out there, unless they're doing it super sleuth-like and it's completely under the radar, it's going to be a bit of a challenge because of the other available defensemen across the National Hockey League. And it ranges from, Jake Chikrin to what about Hampus Lindholm in Anaheim, who we believe the Ducks are trying to re-sign. Obviously, you've got Mark Giordano, John Klingberg. I mean, go down the list. So what tier, if you're a team that's in the market for a defenseman, is looking at Tyler Myers for an additional 2 years at $6 million per? So again, it's not impossible. I wonder about the upside, and then I wonder what Vancouver would have to take back to make it work.
Luke Schenn, there's a lot of reasons why you'd like him, and that might be some of the reasons why they're going to keep him.
Yeah, I mean, I had a conversation with Jimmy Rutherford about Luke Schenn a few weeks back, and he loves him. And to your point, Matt, I mean, there's a lot to like about Luke. He's a top character human being, so he knows what his role is. He's willing to do more when he needs to do more, and when you're healthy and the lineup is full, he's okay with that as well. So, you need those glue guys around the organization. But it's not Luke Schenn's first rodeo either, right? So he's had good success in the National Hockey League. He's had the ultimate success in the National Hockey League. So because of that, I could see some tire kickers. I really could. So we'll see. Again, not another name that I've heard out there in trade speculation, but one that would make some sense. But I know how highly the Vancouver Canucks view what Luke Schenn brings to the dressing room and brings to the group in large. So it would have to be right.
Lastly, Dregs, for me, I know you guys tackled this on Insider Trading, but the European and college free agent season, which is quickly approaching. Now, we have talked in the past about Andrei Kuzmenko, the winger in the KHL, who's considered the best European free agent. The other guy to keep an eye on, he just finished with Team USA at the Olympics, Ben Myers. He's a centerman with the University of Minnesota and appears to have bottom six NHL capabilities. But what are you hearing? Because Rutherford brings up the college and the European free agents often with us.
He does. No, he does. And that's frankly because when you look at the cupboard of the Vancouver Canucks and what's coming, there's not much there, is there? There's just not. So you can only try and restock in so many ways. Be patient, draft, develop, of course. But you do have to take a swing when you're looking at the European free agents and the college free agents. Corey Andronofsky is another name out there out of Princeton. But I feel like if Vancouver isn't in on him, and I don't believe they are, they're going to be late to that dance because there are so many teams trying to get their hands on this kid. And that could happen probably in the next couple of weeks, early March, perhaps. But then you do look at Kuzmenko. And I know Pat Alvin, when he was with Pittsburgh, was, often having conversations with Dan Milstein, the agent for Kuzmenko, about his interest in him. And that hasn't drifted at all. That's carried with him into Vancouver, and Kuzmenko is a high priority for the Vancouver Canucks. But again, the problem there is, there's probably 25 teams in the National Hockey League, frankly, that would like to get their hands on him. If you listen to Milstein, he thinks he's Kirill Kaprizov just waiting to jump into the National Hockey League. So, who couldn't make room for a player of that magnitude? But Vancouver is definitely in the mix.
Wonderful stuff, Dregs. Thank you for this, my friend. Look forward to your work between now and the deadline, and we'll catch up next Wednesday.
All right, guys. Have a great week.
Darren Dreger, everybody, of the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast, part of the Go-Goat Sports family of podcasts, as well the TSN Hockey Insider. He knows better than all of us, so I'm going to take him on his word that he does not view March 21st as sort of a deadline between the Canucks and Boeser to get together on an extension. But his caveat there that, hey, that could change at a moment's notice, I do wonder that whether that will be the case, or at least whether that will be postured to be the case, Blake, from the Canucks front office, where they go to Hankinson and Boeser and say, guys, we need to know what we're looking at in terms of an extension for you because it has an ability to affect our deadline plans. So I would wonder if that file picks up here in the next few weeks between Boeser and the Canucks.
If you're Rutherford, you want to know that you're not in the trenches. right? Like if you see a long, hard road ahead between the two sides, it might be more of a priority for you to move on for the player. But if you don't feel like you're that far apart, if the numbers are reasonable, if you feel like there's a lot of similar language being used, then you might feel pretty optimistic and think, no, this is a player. This is not the devil I know, because he's a wonderful player, but it's far better to hold on to your assets if you've got them under your control than it is to search for a new asset that can give you that or better, right? So in the case of Boeser, I mean, I think you got to proceed cautiously, knowing what he is, knowing what he isn't, and if you get a number that you're comfortable with, then you keep the player.
And if it's looking like that could be a long drawn out, or it's going to be difficult to get the player signed and in training camp for next year, I think
absolutely.
What
ahead, then you move on.
Yeah, and because let's face it, Miller, Boeser, there is not a huge disparity, I wouldn't think, in terms of what they would return value-wise.
Which is strange to me, by the way. That's strange to me, but I think I probably, because I think Miller's a far more versatile player that brings a lot more in terms of intangibles. I know you want to paint him as the Popovsky, but I think a lot of GMs and coaches would value that Popovsky-ness and would see that as a plus, not a minus.
Well, he is a Popovsky, but well, the difference being that, you know, he's under contract for the one more year. Looks like he's having a career season and is older, right? Like I think if you're looking at Boeser, you're looking at saving 4 years in age, and somebody whose best may well be in front of him as opposed to in the here and now. Although, you know, Miller plays center, Miller kills penalties. You know, I get what you're saying. I wonder if it would be more years of service and a better age bracket for Boeser. And look. It is clear, as Dreg says, when you look at the pipeline, there's not a lot coming here. So, you know, they have to trade somebody who is going to populate that pipeline somewhat. And of course, that could be draft picks and prospects as well. But that European free agent, Kuzmenko, would be tremendous. And if they can get in on the top college free agent center, Ben Myers, that would be great for them as well.
Matt, you want top prospects? If you
want
the best looking rookies, housing department, you go to fifthave.ca. We're talking about first year condominiums, first year townhomes, and they're all looking great going into their rookie years. That's right. New construction is all at fifthave.ca, whether it's in the Lower Mainland, the Fraser Valley, over on the island. You can find them all at fifthave.ca. From the comforts of your own couch, peruse all the neighborhoods with all the amenities. No matter what the size range or price range is that you're in, you'll find something at fifthave.ca. You can even book virtual tours, for heaven's sakes,